Hello everyone, Willith here. Today we're heading into one of the most iconic, horrifying, and honestly one of the best written zones in all of Azeroth. Tirisfal Glades. A land of plague, fog, undead horrors, giant frickin' spiders, and somehow, an active, functioning society. Now, on paper, this place sounds completely unlivable. And honestly, it mostly is. But today, we're gonna break it all down. The geography, the food, economy, military defenses, culture, weather, and jobs. And whether the Forsaken have somehow managed to create a functioning nation inside what is basically a haunted biological hazard. So, grab your plague-resistant hazmat suit, and let's dive in. Tirisfal, while once a fertile land of pine forests and rolling meadows, is now utterly infested by blight thanks to Arthas' little Destroy the Kingdom incident. Even the flora and fauna are tainted with blight. The whole region honestly feels like Halloween mixed with chemical warfare. Now, let's see how well people can actually live here. So, obviously, farming is basically a nightmare. The soil is blighted, the water is tainted, and realistically, most crops probably wouldn't even grow properly here. And if they did grow, you're probably eating plague corn and zombie potatoes. Now, I don't think eating one blighted carrot is going to instantly turn you into a member of the Scourge. But it's probably not healthy either. So, farming for normal food? Yeah, probably not happening. Alright, so, if farming is out, what about hunting? Well, pretty much all wildlife here is tainted, in some way or another. The main animals left are diseased bears, darkhounds, twisted by the blight, giant spiders, and huge bats flying through the foggy forests. None of these exactly scream easy dinner. Like, just imagine trying to shoot bats out of the sky every time you wanted a meal. Sorry kids, Dad missed the bat again. Guess we're eating seaweed tonight. Most normal wildlife is either gone entirely or corrupted. And realistically, the darkhounds are probably feeding on corpses, scourge remains, small tainted critters, or whatever unfortunate thing wandered off the road. So, short answer? Hunting here is probably a fantastic way to catch 17 diseases. Now, in harsher environments where farming is difficult or impossible and hunting is scarce, societies usually turn toward livestock, like herding cattle, sheep, goats, or whatever the fantasy equivalent is in the setting and region. But that probably wouldn't work out very well either. For one thing, your livestock would likely get torn apart by darkhounds, or get caught in a giant spider web. And even if they survived, they'd probably just become tainted themselves. So that option's gone too. Which leaves us with one final food source. Fishing. Now, the lakes here? Yeah, no, absolutely not. There are literal undead fish swimming around in these things. Even the fish are freaking servants of the Scourge, denying you any kind of food or fresh water. Ocean fishing, though, that's probably the region's only reliable source of actual food. Now granted, the Forsaken themselves don't actually need to eat, so realistically their fishing industry probably isn't massive. But I could absolutely see them fishing to sell food to the Horde, because even undead nations still need money. However, would you buy fish from a Forsaken vendor? Like honestly, just imagine an undead fisherman with a missing, bleeding fingers handing you seafood. Yeah, now I think I'll pass. So, if you're living in Tirisfal, you're probably surviving off of imported food from the Horde, ocean fish, or sheer determination and prayer. Right, let's move on to resources. And this is where Tirisfal actually gets a little bit more interesting. The zone has a decent number of mountains and rocky terrain, so logically the Forsaken probably have a decent mining industry. So we can safely add ore to the resource list. And while I don't think Tirisfal is good for traditional agriculture, I do think it would be incredible for herbs, mushrooms, fungi, and alchemical ingredients. This is likely one of the few places in Azeroth where certain plague-resistant herbs can even grow. Or heck, even herbs that thrive here, which gives the Forsaken a pretty huge economic niche. I feel like apothecaries here are constantly experimenting with poisons, medicines, alchemy, plague research, salves, and weird-glowing mushroom concoctions. You know, the whole zone probably smells like a wet graveyard and probably a chemistry lab. Now this next resource might be a little bit of an insane idea, but I do think the Forsaken would actually ranch spiders. Because let's be real, what's spider venom going to do to an undead guy missing half his organs? so I could easily see them harvesting silk, venom, alchemical ingredients, and poison sacs, or just straight up milking them for venom. And because almost nobody else in Azeroth would willingly do that job, it gives the Forsaken yet another unique industry. Honestly, the Forsaken and the Australians would really get along well. Now, clearly, the zone still does have forests and lumber, but realistically I don't think blight wood would make a good building material, and burning it for heat would probably fill your lungs with plague fumes. So overall, Tirisfal's food situation is just absolutely terrible. But its other unique resources are genuinely valuable. The herbs, alchemy, mining, venom, and strange plague-related industries would likely make the region surprisingly wealthy. So reluctantly, I'm giving geography and resources a 2 out of 5. Mostly because their food sucks, and it's their resources that's carrying their score. Alright, before we continue any further into the plague-infested nightmare fuel that's Tirisfal, I'd like to bring your attention to Paige's Garden and Critter Co. Do you enjoy healthy plants, adorable critters, and gardening without the risk of contracting 17 diseases? Then check out Paige's Garden and Critter Co. She sells handmade crochets, plants, and all kinds of cozy garden goodies. Unlike Tirisfal's agriculture, her plants are actually alive. Link in the description. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please hit that subscribe and like button. It really helps me to spread the wonders of overanalyzed content to unwilling people. Now with that wholesome emotional recovery complete, let's head back into the undead nightmare. Quick side note before we continue. Like usual for these videos, I'm not considering portals because honestly, portals just ruin everything. Because of these things, there's almost no reason for walls, castles, supply lines, or honestly, half the wars in Warcraft. Congratulations, Mage players, and Blizzard writing team. You broke military strategy, travel, and my dang beautiful logistics. Anyway, moving on. Historically, Tirisfal has actually been invaded successfully multiple times. First by Arthas and his Scourge, then later by the Alliance. And the geography explains why. There are only 2 major land entrances into the region, both located in the south. The rest of the zone is protected by mountains, cliffs, forests, lake, and a sea. Now that sounds great defensively, and it mostly is. The problem is, once an enemy army breaches those choke points, the interior of Tirisfal becomes much harder to defend, because most of the region is relatively open plains and forest, meaning an invading force can just spread out quickly, and history has proven that exactly. Now in modern Warcraft, the Forsaken have actually done a pretty decent job fortifying those southern passes, and honestly, that's all they really need to do. Though personally, I would add like a gatehouse. That'd be great for these places. And perhaps a small barracks. Still, even with that, there are multiple invasion routes. Because if an enemy really wanted to invade Tirisfal, they'd likely attack the southern land passes and the coastline, so as to split the Forsaken forces, making it easier to invade. Which brings us to the next big issue, the shorelines. And if there's one thing Azeroth factions absolutely love doing, it's invading each other from boats. Now in all reality, amphibious invasions are very difficult. Landing troops onto hostile shores is dangerous, mostly because the enemy sees you coming and has time to prepare accordingly. All while the invaders have little to no defenses of their own because they're on a frickin' ship. But if an enemy successfully establishes a beachhead, Tirisfal suddenly becomes a lot harder to defend. Currently, however, the western shoreline actually seems pretty secure. In my opinion, the Forsaken would absolutely control the fortifications there by now. They've already cleared out most of the local threats. And honestly, this whole area would just make for an excellent harbor. And the nearby islands could hold lighthouses, watchtowers, artillery, and naval defenses. And we know the Forsaken have a navy because we literally see their ships every other expansion. So logically, this coastline is likely where their harbor is and would be heavily defended. Invading it would be an absolute freaking nightmare. Now, moving further east, we reach Agamand Mills. And strategically speaking, this place is insanely important. I feel logically the Forsaken would control this entire elevated region by now. It's elevated, it's defensible, it overlooks the whole coastline, and it connects key areas. This would probably be one of the Forsaken's largest military strongholds in the region. Like, I can see walls, towers, plague catapults, mushroom farms, herb fields, barracks, and horde troops all stationed here. Because if either coastline gets attacked, forces from Agamand could quickly reinforce them. Also, if you put Forsaken archers and catapults on elevated terrain, their ranges is increased, which is honestly just horrifying. Alright, now we reach what I'd consider Tirisfal's greatest weakness, this northeastern coastline. If an invading army successfully lands here, they get a relatively direct path toward the capital and the heart of the region. Because of this weak spot, I think logically the Forsaken would heavily fortify nearby positions like Agamond and the Scarlet Monastery region. Speaking of which, let's actually talk about the Scarlet Monastery. So, honestly, I don't think the Scarlet Crusade should still meaningfully control this place. Now, yes, Blizzard keeps them around because they're iconic, but realistically, how are they even sustaining themselves here? Like, what the heck are they eating? How are they recruiting? Who is willingly moving into plague zombie land to join the fantasy Spanish Inquisition? Now, maybe the nearby mountains avoided the worst of the Blight. And if Azeroth functioned more realistically, perhaps the Scarlet Crusade survives through, a little bit of mountain farming, hunting, some livestock raising, and they have some hidden supply caches. But even then, they've been defeated repeatedly. So in my opinion, the most logical outcome is this. The Forsaken likely control the whole monastery itself, while the remaining Scarlet Crusaders survive in the surrounding mountains as scattered guerrillas and raiders. And that actually makes the faction feel more believable, at least to me. Historically, mountain insurgencies are notoriously difficult to eliminate completely. So I could absolutely see Scarlet Remnants occasionally descending from the mountains to raid in the lowlands and attack settlements before being driven back. Now, as for the monastery itself, the Forsaken would absolutely repurpose it. Maybe they'll make it into a magical academy, a necromantic institution, or a military academy, a plague research center, or even a strong, light-worshipping sect for Forsaken who still follow the light. Which just sounds really awkward. Like, imagine being an undead and the holy light still works on you. That's gotta feel like getting sunburned spiritually. Alright, moving on. So the towers throughout the region would also honestly just be occupied by Forsaken or Horde forces. The enemies here have been defeated, and there's no reason to leave perfectly good fortifications abandoned. Alright, moving on towards Death Knell. Again, strategically speaking, this place is fantastic. The surrounding mountains make it naturally defensible, and it would make an excellent garrison location. I feel like this area would contain mining operations because of the mountains, herb farms, spider ranches, troop housing, and supply depots. And because of its location, forces stationed here could quickly reinforce the rest of the region. Now, finally, let's talk about Undercity itself. And again, Undercity is just terrifying strategically. Now, like generally one of the best defended capitals in Warcraft. The city sits atop elevated terrain with walls, choke points, mountains, and a lake protecting much of its surroundings. And there's basically one major way in. That is how you build a fortress city. And holy moly, it has an actual gatehouse. Praise be to the Holy Light. Now, Blizzard almost got the battlements right. Almost. They have the wall overhangs, but they forgot the murder holes underneath. So they were this close to peak medieval engineering. Like, just dang it, Blizzard. I want the dang accuracy here. And for those of you wondering, what use are murder holes? It's because if an enemy gets right up against the walls without that overhang and a murder hole, archers can't really shoot at them. So those people are safe. They can, dig under your wall or, stick a ladder there or whatever. So if you have the murder hole, one, it makes it harder to set up a ladder there. Second, it allows, the archers to shoot through the murder hole and get people so they can't, hide next to your wall. Anyway, now, here's the truly horrifying part. You cannot starve out the undead. A normal siege works because defenders eventually run out of, food, water, sleep, morale, and manpower. The undead simply don't care. They don't sleep, they don't tire, and they don't starve. Which means if you want it to Undercity, you have to physically go in and just fight every single person there. And that just sounds like the single worst military operation in Azeroth. Especially because Forsaken soldiers don't fight like normal people. You can't just stab one guy in the chest and call it a day. You have to physically destroy them. You need to remove their arms, their legs, bones, heads, burn them, crush them, do something. You have to do mechanical damage to these people because they don't feel pain and they can just put themselves back together. And that makes them terrifying defenders. Now, ironically, the Forsaken do have one enormous weakness. They can't really reproduce, meaning every permanent death genuinely matters, which makes the survival of their society incredibly important. Now, yes, technically the Valkyrie used to help offset this, but that's just largely gone now. I feel like that really makes the Forsaken so much more interesting. Now, as for the battle for Lordaeron and BFA goes, I actually think the Alliance invasion itself makes a lot of sense. Invading from the coast and striking directly toward the capital is strategically logical. The Alliance also had the advantage of proximity within the Eastern Kingdoms. The Horde, meanwhile, wouldn't have had much time to reinforce the region, so the Alliance establishing blockades and landing forces here actually works. Now, with that said, what in Azeroth happened to some of the geography during BFA? Entire hills seem to have just disappeared, towers exploded, the terrain gets reshaped like someone cast industrial landscaping. Now, I do wish Blizzard had preserved the original geography a bit more, because personally I think grounded geography makes the world feel more believable. Still, I do think the battle itself would have cost the Alliance heavily. Also, burning these trees and releasing the plague fumes probably wasn't the healthiest thing for their soldiers. Now, invading an undead fortress or city would be just catastrophic. And honestly, Sylvanas blighting the city before retreating does make strategic sense. Because if the Alliance trapped the Forsaken beneath Undercity, that could have meant the extinction of her people. So destroying the city while retreating was brutal, but logical. Deprive your enemies of a useful location, and take as many of the enemy soldiers out as possible. And then, of course, live to fight another day. And now the Undercity does have a back entrance, but it functions as a solid choke point, so it would be easy to defend, or easy to keep people in. Now, as for nearby threats today, honestly, there aren't many. Western Plaguelands is probably the nearest meaningful concern. Now, I won't go into details in this video, but it could be controlled by Alliance-aligned humans or some neutral state. It's the nearest possible hostile territory. And the Alliance territories are further away to pose any immediate danger to Tirisfal. So overall, Tirisfal is fairly secure, and not at too much danger of an invasion. Now let's move on to wildlife and local dangers. At this point, realistically, most Scourge forces within the zone itself would, just be gone. If any Scourge remain, they're probably hiding in remote mountains and caves. And much like the Scarlet Remnants, they'd function more like raiders than organized armies. Now, as for dangerous wildlife, the main threats are darkhounds, giant spiders, diseased bears, and giant bats. In my opinion, if darkhounds were an extreme threat, the Forsaken probably would have exterminated them already. Similar to how Europe and the US nearly exterminated wolves. But because the undead don't have livestock to protect, there's less pressure to wipe them out. And the spiders likely keep mostly to themselves unless disturbed. So honestly, the Forsaken probably maintain security on roads and settlements while letting the wilderness remain dangerous. Meaning the safest life strategy in Tirisfal is simple. Stay on the roads. Do not go wandering through foggy plague forests at night, or really at day. That is how you become environmental storytelling. Now overall, Tirisfal is actually fairly defensible. But once defenses fail, the region becomes vulnerable quickly. And even outside of invasions, the zone still has plague, dangerous wildlife, mountain raiders, undead horrors, giant spiders, and freaking disease. The disease alone makes this place just terrifying. Living among the Forsaken as a normal living person would be just miserable. Like, imagine trying to enjoy a peaceful walk while an undead apothecary carrying plague slime walks past you. Yeah, no thanks. Like, just entering the zone, you'd need a hazmat suit just to live and enter in the zone. Like, you couldn't touch anything. It's just, everything is disease-ridden. Like, that alone is just going to tank this whole thing. I mean, everything else is already not very safe, but that makes it just terrible. So, for safety, I'm giving Tirisfal just a 1 out of 5. The only reason why it's not getting a 0 is because the defense is pretty okay. So, it gets a 1.
Oh, and one last mention of a few more lesser enemies. The Rothhide Gnolls by this point are either gone, as the Forsaken have by, proxy of the quests given out, have stopped them. So they are either wiped out or hiding in the mountains along with what remains of the Scourge. And finally, for the Vilefin Murlocs, I'm willing to bet they are just completely gone by this point. Though they wouldn't pose much threat to the Forsaken as a whole anyway, and in the west, they would be gone because the Forsaken need some place to have their ships. And in the east, the Alliance likely wiped them out to secure their foothold in Tirisfal for their assault on the region. So, all in all, these two enemies are basically gone from the region in current day.
This doesn't change the score at all, I just wanted to include them. Alright, and with that, I hope you all enjoyed Part 1. Part 2 will be coming shortly. Until next time, guys, see you soon.